Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. And welcome to the very first episode in a brand new series, Every Best Picture. Each week, we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the winners for the Academy Award for Best Picture. This week, in our first episode, we are going right back to the beginning to look at the very first winner of the Best Picture Oscar, 1927's Wings.
Hey, and before we set out on this brand new series, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, just go ahead and hit that button, ding that bell so you never, ever miss a video. And you know, we're really excited because I think it was only about 2 months ago, we had just reached 100 subscribers and we couldn't believe it because we're such a new show. And now we've just topped 200. So we just want to extend our thanks to all of you subscribers. And like I said, if you haven't subscribed, join us on this journey, especially this new series. I am so looking forward, James and I, to bringing this series to you over the next 2 years, looking at each and every Best Picture from 1927 until 2022. James, what's first on the list?
Yeah, that gave me chills when you said 2 years like that. You know, this is quite the undertaking that we've given ourselves, and probably there'll be at least one or maybe two more Best Picture winners by the time we get there. So it could be 2023, it could be 2024, depending on how quickly we get through. But we're aiming for one a week, and we're planning to launch this episode the same weekend as the 94th Academy Awards, so that hopefully, 2 years from now, we'll be on track. We'll be all caught up. So the very first winner of the Best Picture Academy Award is William A. Wellman's Wings, which is a hugely innovative World War I wartime epic, which is also a love triangle classic romance. It stars Clara Bow, Charles Rogers, and Richard Arlen. And essentially it's the story of two men from the same small town who are love rivals for the same sort of small town girl, who both sign up in 1917 to join the Air Force and head off to fight the Germans. And
James, I was really excited to finally see Wings because, as a movie lover myself, I'm a little embarrassed that not every one of the Best Picture films is a film that I've seen. And I remember my favorite video store, both in America in the 80s and in Hong Kong in the 90s, both at different times had selections of the Best Picture films in VHS. And I don't think they had every one, but I remember thinking, I really want to work through them all, kind of like we're doing now. And I thought I really should watch the first one, Wings. I could see Wings is available. And I thought, do I really want to watch a 2-hour silent movie? And I thought, and so I always put it off. Now that we're taking on this new series, I have the excuse to watch it. And admittedly, again, I'm looking at this. This has a running time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I thought 2 hours and 20 minutes of a silent film, 100 years old. I thought this is going to be something to be endured rather than enjoyed. I couldn't have been more wrong. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed this film, how revolutionary the filmmaking was, how developed the story was, even for the time. It took challenges, it took dares, it pushed the envelope in ways that I didn't realize they could do in 1928. I think they even had the first scene of nudity. They had the first kiss that is really borderline homoerotic. I'm watching this going, whoa, they did that in 1927. And so I was pleasantly surprised by Wings, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I totally understand how this became the very first picture to take home the Oscar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen this once before, but it was about 10 years ago. And it's amazing how well it holds up, in 2022 to today's standards, dare I say. It was so innovative. It did push the envelope in so many, many ways. And you can barely even really call it a silent movie. You hear the engines roaring and the guns blazing and all that. It's really only the dialogue almost that isn't recorded. It's probably no surprise that it won, as well as Best Picture, it won an Oscar for Best Mechanical Effects as well. And I'm not entirely sure what that means, and I don't know that it was given out ever again. Certainly isn't given out today.
I think whoever was on the awards board 100 years ago looked at those flying sequences and go, if we don't have an award for this, we've got to make one up, because these folk deserve it. There was incredible. You could see how the camera work that was done really set the tone for future dogfight and fighting movies we've come to, that we know.
Oh, sure. I mean, absolutely. I mean, watching it again, the two films that really came to mind immediately were Top Gun and Pearl Harbor. Because arguably, sort of the broad strokes of the plot, you know, about how you got to, I think they're brothers in Pearl Harbor, but you know, it's two best friends fall in love with the same woman, and then you know, they end up, the war comes between them and all the rest of it. You know, the very broad strokes of that. I was like, okay, yeah, Michael Bay's definitely sort of seen this movie or had it in mind when he was conceiving.
It's interesting. Harbor. It's interesting you said Pearl Harbor and Top Gun, because I came up with Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, and even Starship Troopers. That trope, and we're going to see All Quiet on the Western Front very shortly as a Best Picture winner. But it is that story of the naive young buck or two guys who are, you know, full of enthusiasm. They're going off to war. They have no clue what tragedy lays before them, and then the process of them seeing, you know, the horrific things that men do to one another, and then coming back with, you know, I love how even in this film, even though he's still a really young guy, they grade his hair. If you notice on the side,
he's got some little salt and pepper there in the sides.
That's it. Even though he's got still that little baby face, but they come back mature. They come back with a much better understanding of how the world operates. And so this movie set a standard or a template that many movies after it were to follow.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Full Metal Jacket, because I think there's a shot that Full Metal Jacket actually recreates. I remember when I was watching it, I was like, oh, Kubrick's stolen that shot. It's when they're going to enlist, and there's the Dutch guy who, you know, his patriotism is questioned. And one of them gets kicked to the ground, and the drill sergeant sort of looms over him and shouts directly into the camera. And it's framed in such a way, and he's got the hat on, he's poking his finger into the lens, and there's an identical shot with R. Lee Ermey as the drill instructor in Full Metal Jacket. And I was like, oh, surely that is an homage to this particular shot.
Oh, that's a fantastic point to raise. Yeah, I hadn't connected those two.
I mean, it's incredible. We talk about how, yes, the actual mechanics of the filmmaking was so innovative here. And one of the incredible things that I read was that the two lead actors actually flew their own planes.
Yes.
So, and not only that, but they operated their own cameras as well. So, because those are just single-seater planes. So while they're in the planes and they've got the camera right in front of them doing their sort of their close-ups, they were the ones that had to load the camera, make sure it was running, reload the camera, and sort of frame it for themselves. So they were as much involved with that and fly a plane at the same time and act and not crash and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy achievement. It's so impressive, and I think a lot of that photography and a lot of those sort of dogfights, as you said, and that aerial photography really sort of stands up today and is as good as anything you're going to see. I mean, we're about to have Top Gun Maverick coming out this year, and you know, and this can, I think, can hold its head high alongside a movie like that.
Absolutely. The dogfights in this, I couldn't believe they were able to capture the aerial dogfighting that they did in this film. And it's interesting, while I was doing a little research on the movie, that at one point the director asked the Air Force, which it wasn't Air Force yet, it was the division of the Army, I think Army Air Corps or something. He needed more planes. I need more planes down here. So it said they sent 300 planes from the Selfridge base outside of Detroit, Michigan. I grew up around that base. I remember going to that base.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just interesting. I didn't even realize Selfridge was that old, from like the 1920s, but they sent the planes down from my hometown to be in that film.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm pretty sure that this film was the very first time that Hollywood ever sort of collaborated with the US military. I mean, now it's kind of a given, and it happens on pretty much every production. It's like, you need an aircraft carrier, sure. You know, how many MiGs do you need, and you know, and how many tanks and all the rest of it. And the military sort of are more than happy to help. And I think that they have it carved out of their own budget. You know, sure, we'll do this certain amount, because they see it as a recruitment drive. You look at when movies like sort of Top Gun and whatever came out, and enlistment spiked, you know, in the wake of it. And so, but this was the very, very first time. And it was purely because it was just an ambitious project. It had a budget of $2 million, which for the time was astronomical. And they were just looking at ways to cut corners and to, make it as cheap and economical as possible. And so they turned to the military, and that just set a precedent.
Hey, I was one of those guys right out of high school. I think it might have been not Platoon. It wouldn't have come out yet. Might have been Top Gun, where me and a couple buddies, we went down to the local recruiter. I took the ASVAB test. I scored really high. They wanted to recruit me. I felt really bad because this other guy was there with his brush cut already. And he had the Army, and all he wanted to do was get in, like sign up that day. And he didn't score high enough. And I did. And then I suddenly realized, wait, I don't know if I really want to be in the military. I'm a lover, not a fighter. Come on. And but yeah, the power that those movies have to, especially when you're a young kid, you see these heroics on the screen. You want to go and be part of the big, wider world. You want to fight for something bigger than yourself. And that's why young kids are sadly the ones who go and die in these wars, because guys our age think, I'm not going to do that.
Well, and that's exactly what you see happening in the film here. You know, the Great War, the First World War, had been going on for like a couple of years already. It's set in 1917, but they felt duty bound to go, and everybody was looking forward to it, and they wanted to go. They wanted to do their part. You know, it's the rich guy and his family who are like, you don't have to do this. We can get you out of it. And he's like, no, I absolutely want to go. Whereas it's the young sort of working class lad, Jack, who's like, sure, I really, really want to go. And I thought it was really interesting how sort of race and patriotism was highlighted in those early scenes, particularly where you've got this Dutch, I think he's a Dutch immigrant, isn't he? And they're like, what are you doing? We don't need your sort around here. Who you're not an American, essentially. And he has to keep on again and again showing his Stars and Stripes tattoo off that he's got, just to sort of prove how American he is.
And it's interesting in 1927, when you want to kind of raise what we would typically see as a moment in a film where we want to identify a race issue. Normally we would have a black skin or a brown skin or an Asian, like in an American film, in that place. But in 1927, we were so racist, even our racist scenes had to include another white guy. What's the Dutch guy? Is there anything more white Irish than the Dutch guys? Yeah, it's Dutch, Irish, maybe Italian, and it just shows you how, things have changed.
For sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because even at the time, Wings was perceived to be sort of a risky venture. But it was kind of contradictory because in a way, it was this huge undertaking that Paramount put into production, their most expensive film ever made, if not the most expensive Hollywood movie ever made. And then they give it to this sort of young, I think he was like 29-year-old filmmaker, William Wellman, who had done a couple of like sort of cowboy movies or whatever beforehand, but nothing on this scale, nothing to prove that he had the chops. And he had a kind of little bit of the older sort of Orson Welles in him as well. He wanted to try new things. He always wanted to experiment. He was always looking, to approach things in a different way. But it seems like there was pressure from the studio all the time while this film was being made. It got heavily rewritten because it was this real sort of boys' own adventure going in. Yes. And I don't know if it felt it to you, but all the scenes with Clara Bow in it feel kind of slightly shoehorned in.
They're absolutely shoehorned in. And why that is.
Well, she was the biggest star in Hollywood at the time. It's like putting Jennifer Lawrence into Platoon or something.
Right. Absolutely. You feel like, why is she in there? Because normally you would have just one girl that's vying for the attention, but now we have two, and you're thinking, well, what's the story with this one? But then you
Well, where's
story.
so where's the conflict? You know, they can have one each and everyone's happy. Sure.
And so you've got these studio producers going, we got to get Clara Bow in this. So rewrite this script and bring it back to me. And that's essentially what happened, is they rewrote that script to accommodate bringing her into the film.
Yeah, and so all the sequences with her in it, you know, at the beginning playing with the car, and then when she's off, you know, driving trucks around in France, whatever, all just feel a little bit kind of like an afterthought, really. They just take you away, even tonally, just from the rest of the narrative. It reminded, did you ever see, there was a movie in the 80s called Best Defense with Dudley Moore and Eddie Murphy. And essentially it's a movie about Dudley Moore, who is working for the military, designing tanks, or maybe he's even a civilian and he designed it for some other purpose, and then the military take over his design because they want to use it for their new experimental tank or something like that. I can't really remember. And they made the movie, and the studio was like, this movie's terrible. It's really boring. It needs more humor. It needs more excitement. And so it was completely rewritten. And they invented Eddie Murphy's character, who's like a tank commander in the battlefield, who's driving this new experimental tank in a wartime situation. And they just keep cutting back and forth, cutting away to him. And he's just on his own in a tank, kind of fighting. And you're like, this is the weirdest movie ever. And he's just being given free reign just to riff and do all his stuff and just to do these crazy, you know, monologues,
talk smack and things,
that he does. And the result is this bizarrely disjointed movie. And so it was really no surprise to read that all of the Eddie Murphy stuff was just inserted after the fact, just to try and sex it up a little bit, try and make it funnier, try and make it more successful. But obviously it wasn't. That's why no one knows that movie now. And the Clara Bow stuff feels a little bit like that.
It absolutely is. And it's interesting that I looked up a little bit about Clara Bow going into the film, and it's really tragic. She did successfully make the transition from silent films to speaking films. But then she
to the talkies.
Thank you. I was trying to think of what the terminology was. And then she just drifted off. She gave up acting. Apparently she developed some form of schizophrenia, and she lived in a bungalow by herself and wouldn't give interviews, wouldn't acknowledge people's existence, and just ended up dying about 60 years old all alone, and had that, you know, that tragic, the diva who, you know, goes and retreats into the back room somewhere and just forgets the rest of the world.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, no, I don't think I've seen a ton of her other work, actually, to be honest. So I'm not surprised that a lot of it is sort of silent film, which I've seen obviously far less of. Of course, the other actor who this was kind of a big break for him is Gary Cooper. Yes, he plays. Yeah, he's like the flying ace. Yeah, who has them just one scene really with them, and sort of tells them, you know, they're like fanboying out over him.
I was fanboying out over him. I just thought as soon as he walked into that tent, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to use our word, there's the gravitas right there. It's like suddenly there's this Gary Cooper aura. And even though he was an unknown at that point, and I think this was his first major role, he looked quite young in it. He still, you could just see, this guy's going to be a star. He has it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and he's the one that has the line about how nobody knows when they're gonna buy it. You know, when they're gonna die. Essentially, you know, every time you go up in the air and get into that machine, you know, you're holding your life in your hands, basically. So you either do it, or you either, you know, that's the decision you have to make. And once you've made that decision, every day could be your last, and you just got to go out there and do it. And then, yes, he dies 2 minutes later. So yes, and I think that really attracted a lot of studios to him. And after that, he really sort of made a name for himself.
I think you mentioned earlier, I think, is it David Arlen and Charles Rogers are the two actors?
Richard Arlen and Charles Rogers.
Richard Arlen. I think Richard Arlen, if I read correctly, he already knew how to fly, but Charles Rogers actually learned how to fly for this role, which is, you think is amazing. It's one thing for an actor to maybe gain a skill, learn some horseback riding skills or something, but to learn how to fly and then to do aerial combat and camera work is just phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy to think. Like you said, I mean, the only person who does that kind of stuff these days is Tom Cruise. You know, he's like, yeah, I'm going to learn how to fly a helicopter for 2 years so I can do these kind of nose dives, dead drops, you know, it's like, you're crazy. Whereas yeah, for Charles Buddy Rogers, it was just another job, really.
It's
and
funny.
apparently, yeah, every time he finished, he would like get out and throw up everywhere.
Yeah. The one time I did fly in a light plane like that, it's a completely different experience. I got so sick. It's not fun. You really have to develop a stomach for that.
Oh wow! I mean, I've been in like a Cessna, but then you're kind of in something. You're not. And that's the other thing that that really sort of struck me about this film and about sort of aerial combat at that time, is that the pilots themselves are so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That so many of the deaths you see in the movie are not necessarily like the plane getting shot down. It's the pilot getting shot.
Yes.
Because they're literally sort of, they're sitting in a canoe essentially with wings.
And machine gun fires just rifling past them, and then occasionally one hits them. And there's nothing in that plane that's going to stop that bullet.
Right. And so there's and by extension, there's nothing wrong with the plane, but because the pilot is now dead, it nosedives and crashes. And tragically, that's what happens to David, to Richard Arlen's character in the most sort of ironic, tragic, yet inevitable way at the end.
Yeah. It's and to see him, basically survive behind enemy lines, steal the plane, take off, and then to get shot down by his best friend. I mean, that was
it's sort of so classic in its sort of tragic execution. You're just like, it's kind of the only way it could ever end, but still it's so horrible. But I mean, I want to talk about some of the other innovative moments, that it's not just the flying sequences. There's some other stuff in there. I mean, there's particularly that scene in Paris at in the big sort of dance hall where they go, for a bit of R&R on the night when he's seeing bubbles everywhere, and Jack is absolutely smashed out of his head. Well, actually, they all are. And you've got that shot that starts from the opposite end of the ballroom, and then goes through every table, through the middle of every table, past every couple, and then comes right and finds Jack, deep in a bottle of champagne at the other end. You're just like, this is amazing. This is so early in the development of film camera techniques.
Track shots like that.
Yeah, exactly. When cameras really didn't move, they were too big and too heavy that you'd have them on a tripod, and that's why so many early films look so static and they look like sort of filmed theater more than anything. It's the lack of mobility of the camera, whereas this is, it's on like a dolly track, so it's on like rails essentially, and it means that every time, just as you're going out of frame, those actors have to get out, and that table has to get out of the way, and then they go over the next table, and that table, it's so impressive. I mean, you'd watch a shot like that today and be like, that's cool. Yes. And today it's a handheld camera, or it's even a drone or whatever. It's so easy. It's a phone. Even now, it would still be a cool shot. But back then, it's groundbreaking.
He was really drunk in that scene.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, he'd actually never drank liquor before. He had been a teetotaler, and they got him drinking the champagne. And so he wasn't that drunk. He was probably having to act the level of drunk, but he was inebriated in that scene.
Oh, wow. Well, I did not know that, but that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I just love seeing, sorry.
I was going to say, one of the other things I wanted to raise was, in addition, not just the aerial warfare, but the ground warfare shots were incredible. The trenches they dug, the barbed wire, the sheer amount of real people. There was no CGI, that they recreated this World War I battlefield. And I was reading that the director gave 20 guys handheld cameras and told them to just go and shoot anything and everything. And that's where they got some of that B-roll footage and extra shots.
Oh, it's so incredible. There's a shot where I'm sure these two guys manning a machine gun were about to get driven over by a tank. And then at the last second, the tank just sort of turns. I'm like, so was that maybe compositive, one shot on the other shot? Or I'm not sure, but
there was a couple scenes where I was wondering about the safety of, did they have proper safety regulations going on in 1927?
Probably not. It's always a learning curve, that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, yes,
as quite we learned often because Alec Baldwin, we've learned recently.
Well, that's it. We're still, even in 2022, we're still learning about firearm safety on a film set. And yeah, sadly, yeah, a lot of people have had to be injured or worse in order to for that to develop. So let's talk about the actual Oscars themselves, because this was the winner of the very, very first Best Picture. Still, to this day, the only silent film ever to win Best Picture. I mean, there's The Artist.
The Artist,
but is
yes.
The Artist a real silent movie? Because there is a line of dialogue right at the end. And, you know, so, okay, there's The Artist as well. But other than that, it's the only film to ever win Best Picture. So it's a weird one as well, because they took place in, 1928? Or 1920? No, they actually took place in 1929. These are the first Oscars. And they covered 1927 and 1928. And they awarded films from both of those years. And you can tell they didn't really know what they were doing and were still trying to feel their way. I mean, it took place in a hotel ballroom in LA. Apparently the award ceremony itself lasted about 15 minutes, which would be music to the ears of ABC right now, who are, you know, putting all kinds of restrictions on the Academy to get their ceremony down to 3 hours. And ahead of the ceremony, everybody already knew who had won. There was no excitement or tension in the room in that regard at all. So there was a few different awards out, not nearly as many as there are now. But Best Picture was awarded to Wings, as well as Best Mechanical Effects that we've said. Now, on the night, there were kind of two Best Pictures. So I was wondering ahead of time how we were going to discuss this, but there was Best Picture Production that went to Wings. And then there was Best Picture Unique and Artistic Production, which went to F.W. Murnau's Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. And then retroactively, like a year or two later, the Academy decided that's a lower tiered award. On the night, they kind of said, oh, these two awards are equal. They're equally important. But then later on, they said, actually, they're not. And Unique and Artistic Production is a lower award, and the one we gave to Wings is the best one.
They should have gone into politics. That's
So I think to wrap this episode up, Steve, do you think, or to what degree do you think, Wings deserves its place in history, its title as Best Picture winner, and does it stand the test of time?
Yeah, I think from what I've said over the last 20, 30 minutes or so, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed a film that I thought I was going to be enduring. And then above and beyond that, how much the films that I have loved over the last 50 years drew from this film. This film was innovative on so many levels. It was good storytelling. It was great camera work, innovative, as you mentioned. This film deserves its place in history as the very first Academy Award winning Best Picture.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't seen a ton of films from this period, but it seems like the perfect film to transition us out of the silent era into the talkies. It feels like that kind of sort of gatekeeper, if you like, it feels very much like that's what the kind of the Oscars were doing.
It just hit me, James, I should have mentioned this earlier, but a lot of the silent little shorts that I have seen in my lifetime, it always seems like, oh, wow, this is new technology. Let's have a man walk in and slap somebody else on the forehead or on the, and have a girl, do something. But it's almost like they're learning technology. And this is a new thing that we've never done before. I thought Wings was going to be that. What I got in Wings was a film that really could have been done today, but just happened to be done in 1927. This was a film by filmmakers and people who understood film and knew what they were doing.
Yeah, no, for me, this kind of Wings almost feels like sort of the Avatar of its day. It was a movie that really sort of pushed the envelope in terms of what film as a medium could be, what could be achieved in terms of storytelling. Absolutely. With technology. You feel that new technology is being developed on the fly in order to capture all of this. And really just took the whole art form forward by one. You can see the one giant leap kind of happening on screen as you're watching it. And I think for those reasons alone, it remains incredibly sort of important. And because it feels so ahead of its time, that even today it feels incredibly sort of relevant, important, and most importantly, I think, entertaining.
Indeed. You like you said about the innovation, you could see the director was seeing the scenes he wanted to see played out, and they created the technology, or they created the means in order to make that happen. And so I agree. This deserves its place in history.
So that's it. That's our first episode of Every Best Picture. Let us know in the comments. What have you seen Wings? Do you think it deserved to win Best Picture? What do you feel that it contributed most to the evolution of cinema? Do stay tuned for more episodes. Check out the other videos that we've got covering newer releases, but we are going to be back every week covering each and every one of the 93, 94 Best Picture winners.
I'm so looking forward to it, and we're looking forward to you joining us on this journey. So like I said at the beginning of this clip, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that. And also James and I are on social media, and you'll find in the information below where you can connect with us on Twitter and on Instagram. Until next episode, James.
Goodbye.